Hello everyone, my name's Brad and welcome to Mediocre Models. In this video I'm going to show you how I'd paint Imperial Japanese Army using contrast paints. Here I have one already painted up as a test model. I'll be using this model. He's been undercoated in corax white, and for contrast paints I'll be using skeleton horde, militarum green, gore grunter fur, snakebite leather, black Templar and darkoath flesh. And then I have leadbelcher for any of the metallic areas, and then Null Oil and agrax earthshade for shades at the end. So I'll get set up with the first paint and then we can begin. The first colour I'll be using will be skeleton horde, and this will be for the main part of his uniform, so his trousers and his shirt, as well as his helmet and the strap for his helmet. I'll also use it to paint in this sort of satchel or bread bag or whatever it is back here. So I'll continue on putting this on until he's all done, and then once that's dry we can move on to the next colour. While the skeleton horde is still drying a little bit, the next colour I'll move on to will be militarum green, and when putting this on I'll just put it onto his straps for his boots. Putting it on, try and be careful, try and make sure you don't get any onto his uniform. Once I've applied this, I'll just let this dry before we move on to the next colour. Now that he's dry, the next colour I'll move on to will be gore grunter fur. And putting this on, it'll go onto his boots, as well as any of the sheaths for the bayonet. And it'll also go onto his belt, any of the ammo pouches at the front, and also if they have any of these little box things at the back. So I'll go and finish that off and let that dry, and then we can move on to the next colour. I'll also put it onto any of the leather straps for the rifles or any of their weapons as well. Now that the gore grunter fur is dry, the next colour I'll move on to will be snakebite leather. And when applying this, I'll just apply it to any wooden areas on the weapons. It'll be obviously the main body of the rifle. If you have any equipped with the SMGs or LMGs, it'll be any wooden areas on that. While the snakebite leather is still drying a little bit, the next colour I'll move on to will be black Templar, and I'll apply this just to the handle of the bayonet. So some models you might have the bayonet actually on the weapon, other models the bayonet might be on their webbing. Once that's all dry, I'll go through with corax white and fix up all his skin, and then we can move on to the final contrast paint. Now that his skin has been cleaned up and is dry now, the next colour I'll move on to will be darkoath flesh, and this will be for any areas of their skin. So it'll be his face, around his neck, and also his hands. Once I've finished applying this, I'll let this dry, and then we can move on to the metallics and then the shades. I'll let that dry and then we can move on to the metallics. And now with the darkoath flesh all dry, the next colour I'll move on to will be leadbelcher, and I'll use this to paint in any metallic areas on the model. So that'll be a little buckle on the front of his belt, any clips he has on his webbing, and I'll also use this to paint in any metallic areas on the weapons as well. I like to paint my weapons this way because I just like how it looks. Once I finish doing this, I'll let this dry and then we can move on to the final shades. Now that all the metallic areas are dry, the first shade I'll move on to will be Null Oil. This will just be a shade over all the metallic areas. So if you painted your weapons like I have, it'll just be over the metal areas on the weapons. Otherwise, it'll just be for any of the metal buckles and clips and things like that on his webbing. After I've applied this and let this dry, we can move on to the final shade. Now that the Null Oil is dry, the next shade I'll move on to will be agrax earthshade, and this will just be a shade over the entire model. Putting it on, try to avoid any major pooling, and if you painted the weapons like I have, try to avoid any of the major metallic areas. Putting this on, it'll just help darken down all those colours, tie them all in together. It'll also give them a really nice dirty war-torn look, which I like the look of. Once this has all been applied and I've let it dry, we'll come back and take one further look at him, see how he looks finished. So I'll let that dry and then we can take one final look at them. Now that the agrax earthshade is almost fully dry now, there's still some parts in the deepest areas of the model that's still drying a little bit. And this is what he looks like. As you can see, that shade's really brought down the tone of the model, helped tie in all the colours together. It's also given him that really dirty war-torn look, as if he's been out in the jungle fighting for a while. So yeah, that's how he looks. Things to note is these straps along his back here and on his front. If you want these to stand out a bit more, you can paint these up another couple of different ways. You could go through with grunter fur and paint them sort of the same leather color as this. Another thing you could do as well is use corax white or wraithbone and paint them in like just with the corax white or the wraithbone, and then just leave them that color, and then when you do the final shade at the end, the shade will help tint them a little bit if you want them to be a bit brighter. But yeah, apart from that, that's how I'd paint my Imperial Japanese army. The only thing left to do now is to base them up, and he can join his squad mate here. So yeah, hope you found that interesting and helpful, and hope you enjoyed that. That's it for this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.